I'm president of PPRTA. I want to say welcome to our new members who just joined, or those that new as a result of this presentation and the announcement of this presentation. So welcome. I would ask everybody to mute. If you can mute, please, during this presentation, up until the point maybe you have questions. So if you could just hit mute, that would be excellent. Mute away, everybody. I want to welcome our guests. We have with us today Provincetown Director of Public Works, Richard Waldo. Hello, Richard. DPW, for those in the know. And from Eversource, we have Ronit Goldstein, who's Community Relations and Economic Development, and Jennifer Kotaspati, who's Project Services with Eversource. And I want to start by thanking actually both those groups, that is DPW and Eversource, for all the work you did during our last storm. That is kept us rolling along. So thank you so much to you folks. Again, please mute during the presentation unless you have questions. With respect to questions, if you have a question, just put it in the chat. It's easier for me than the hand raised feature. So just put in chat, not the question, but just a question mark, or that you have a question, and I'll just call on you and ask you to ask your question. I did want to say just a couple of things before we start. Our first presentation will be from Director Waldo, but I wanted to say just this, that I think one of the biggest challenges for part-timers or really any citizen is keeping informed knowledge as to what is happening with town governance, what's happening in your community, in your town. And one of PPRTA's mission is to bring to you knowledge of what is happening in your community, Provincetown. When you have that, you can decide if you agree, disagree, want to add to the conversation. You're perfectly content with the conversation, but you can't make that choice unless you have knowledge. So as I said, one of our things is to bring that to you. In the past, we've had conversations with folks from local governance, including town manager, some select board members, and we've had folks like the health director. We had a spokesperson on solar panels, and presenters like today. Who are, I would put them in a category of a little more boots on the ground kind of folks, so to speak. We have surveyed our membership, by the way, as you guys know, and have found some of the big ticket items that you're interested in is infrastructure, such as including sewer hookup, sewer expansion, which we're going to hear on, keeping the power on, which is another thing we're going to hear about, and broadband and the like. I want to thank board member Kevin Cronin, who arranged the speakers for today, addressing two of these infrastructure related topics, sewer expansion and the newly built backup battery at the transfer station. Broadband will be upcoming in another one of our conversations. And by the way, if you have topics that you're interested in, please feel free to email me or any one of the board members, and we will make arrangements to have somebody come address that. Okay, so let me repeat that. If you have other topics that you're interested in, just email me and we will look into it. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with DPW Director Waldo. I hope all of you had a chance to read the most excellent report, by the way, and that you are now armed with your questions and ready to go. But I will turn it over now to Mr. Waldo. And I would ask you first, could you just tell us how long you've been with DPW?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Pat. And thank you, Kevin, for putting this on and reaching out and setting this up. My name's Richard Waldo. I've been the Public Works Director in Provincetown since 2012. It's shocking to myself that 10 years has already gone by. It feels like I just took this job. I have an engineering background. I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of Massachusetts. I'm also a trained land surveyor, and I'm working on my master's degree right now in public administration. I've always been involved in public works. I've always been involved in construction, and working for the town has just taken me to the next level by broadening my horizon, introducing a whole world of utilities and the public, just the public in general, which is probably my biggest area of growth. Excuse me for that. Without further ado, I want to get into this presentation. As Pat said, I hope you guys had the chance to review this packet because there's a lot of information here. I'm going to go over the presentation that was given to the select board on September 13th. I'm just going to breeze through it really quick, highlight a couple of the key slides and make sure that we leave enough time for question and answer sessions at the end. They tell me I got 30 minutes. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and try to dive right into this presentation. You guys able to see that? Okay, good. It's a little funky on my end. So one of the things that we always like to do in these sewer meetings is talk about the history, because the history has a lot to do with where we are currently. This sewer system that we built was originally built to serve 500 properties 20 years ago, and it was a no-growth sewer system. We weren't going to expand it. It was just to serve these downtown areas, to improve the harbor, and that was it. And of course, as soon as you build something, the demand and the want was almost immediate. To date, 20 years later, we have expanded and we've served almost about 1,500 properties at this point. So in town as a whole, we serve about 50% of the properties within town at this point. We've invested about $60 million in our sewer infrastructure through betterments as well as grants. And I think remaining at this point is 35% of the existing sewer abutters have not signed up to connect. So we got infrastructure on the ground, and we still got about 35% of people that abut the sewer system that are not signed up to connect. So here's an overview map of all the parcels that are served in Provincetown. This represents the 50%. You see some gaps in the planning process. Those were through outreach where we had interest, where we didn't have interest. And mostly in the early years, it was that downtown corridor that we wanted to infill, which we did a good job. You can see all along the water, we have sewer infrastructure. And then we kind of branched out along Champaign Road, as well as to the Truro Town line. The most trickiest part of operating our sewer system is the fluctuations that we have between seasons. We have a 10-time differential between the peak season and the peak low season. This is extremely unique for a wastewater system. There's no other sewer system in Massachusetts, even within the US, as we know, that sees as much as a fluctuation from their lowest season to their highest season. Provincetown's very unique on that. You will see this little green line here. That represents pretty much 60% of Title V flow. And I'm not going to get into that too much in this presentation, but it does have a key factor in planning. Mass DEP assigns a sewer gallon to Title V to flow, like a bedroom is 110 gallons. What we see at the treatment plant is really 60% of that. So for every one bedroom, we're seeing 60% of that 110 that DEP assigns to a bedroom. Like I said, I'm not going to get too much into that. As stated in previous slides, the system needs to be designed to handle the peak flow, the peak day. What are those? That's July 4th, that's Carnival event. Our sewer system needs to be able to handle that day's flow. And that is required by DEP. So in some sense, we have a sewer system that is way too big in the wintertime. I mean, it's much larger than we need in the wintertime, but we just barely get by in the summertime. And that's one of the tricky parts of planning for sewer in Provincetown. There are a couple of operational constraints that we still deal with. Grease is a major problem for our operators. Grease from the restaurants, from kitchens and stuff like that. It slows the biological process at the treatment plant. We can't treat the effluent as quickly. We can't basically move the influent that's coming out, move it through our plant and out to our leaching beds fast enough, which causes us to recycle flow, which again limits our ability to expand the sewer system. This is a problem that we've been trying to address for 20 years. We're making some headway, but Provincetown just has a high concentration of restaurants in our downtown area per capita. There's not much on this slide. Going back 20 years, one of the biggest issues that we have with our sewer system today is that a special legislation 20 years ago allowed people to opt out of our sewer system or a sewer connection. So typically in most communities, you have a sewer main that runs down the street. Everyone's assessed a betterment on that street, and at some point in time, you connect. But in Provincetown 20 years ago, through a special legislation, basically said, if there's a sewer main in the street and you don't want to connect, you don't have to. And this has huge implications, because that's why we have so much difficulty serving some areas of town, because there's not enough interest in certain areas, particularly let's say Conwell Street and Harry Kemp Way. There hasn't been enough interest in that area to actually cover the cost of construction to expand the sewer system. Additionally, you'll see us constantly digging up the road, Bradford Street. We just did a couple of sewer connections there. 5 years ago, we repaved Bradford Street, made a nice street, added some bike lanes, repainted the road. And 5 years later, we get to dig it up for a sewer connection. Why? Because that's what the special legislation's allowed for. We can't use enterprise funds to put stubs in the road to get it off, to get a connection from the main to the property line. It's not allowed under the enterprise fund. So this checkerboard system is one of those tough policy decisions that the town's going to need to, confront in the future, is whether to remove that checkerboard system and require all abutting properties to a sewer main to pay our betterment. Through the life of the sewer system, we never use general fund subsidy. It's always been funded through betterment or through grants. So with that $60 million, I think there was about $28 million, or what you call $30 million that came from grants, and $30 million that were paid from betterment. So we never use town funds to expand the sewer system. That's something that we might look at in the future. Do we want to use a general fund subsidy to actually expand the sewer system, to expand the treatment plant? One of those decisions that need to be made in the future. The costs of a betterment, and I should define what a betterment is. A betterment is a cost allocation for the treatment capacity as well as the infrastructure in the road. So basically your portion of the sewer system, your cost, and it's based on the Title V system. So for every gallon that you purchase, it's $55 per gallon. So a bedroom is 55 gallons. I mean, a bedroom is 110 gallons. At $55 is about $6,000. So for each bedroom, you pay a $6,000 fee for a betterment, and that covers all the infrastructure and treatment infrastructure that's in the ground. So that's how we pay our debt service, is through betterment collected. In phase one, a 3-bedroom house would pay $11,000 betterment. Phase 5, which is our latest phase, it's up to $18,000 for a 3-bedroom house. We do expect that betterment rate to change. It's at $55 now, which was increased from $45. And we do expect for any future expansion, that number could rise as high as $125 per gallon. This slide, not going to go into it too much. We do have other constraints. We have site constraints. We have effluent bed constraints. For those that don't know, we took over Route 6 20 years ago to put our effluent beds under Route 6. So Route 6 is no longer under the jurisdiction of the state. We own it. We maintain it. And, we did so just so we could get some effluent beds within that right of way. Effluent bed is where, after the treatment process at the treatment plant, the clean liquid goes under the ground and goes into the bed, and it requires quite a bit of space. To give a sample on how much space we're talking for effluent beds underground, take the size of Mater Field, and that's how much space is used for effluent beds for our treatment plant. That is a constraint moving forward. We would need more open land to expand our treatment capacity. We would need more room for effluent beds. And, Mater Field was brought into that discussion. This slide here gives a representation of the 2 types of systems that we have to collect wastewater in our town. We have a vacuum system that handles all our downtown flow. We have a vacuum system because of our high groundwater and the fact that we can't move water by gravity because of the high groundwater. And then we have the gravity system, which is in green. So we have a mix of 2 types of systems. They both have their pros and cons. I think the vacuum system is much harder to monitor and to it's dependent on power. It's it's subjected to hiccups and just failure of a pipe. You can lose vacuum pretty quick and it runs into problems. Over the years, we've been able to take a lot of properties off the vacuum system and put them on gravity, but I don't expect that shaded area to change much in the future. This slide here gives a little aerial view of the expansion that we just did on phase 5. This is a peak flow storage tank that we added. This allows us to open up 155,000 gallons of Title V capacity, to provide us some relief and give us some maybe a 10-year planning window to see if the town of Provincetown wants more sewer. Do we need more capacity? Do we want to serve other areas? Do we want to serve the whole town? Do we want to serve, Truro, neighboring Truro, offer some assistance there? This site here has its limitations. This is an old burn dump. Can you guys see my cursor? You can. So this whole area up here is the edge of an old burn dump, which is limited by DEP. So, what looks like a pretty good sized parcel, we're really limited to work within this area within here. So we have site constraints on this site for further expansion. And, we're looking at new technologies every day on how we can expand capacity. And whether it's no longer at this site, we might need a satellite site in the future. And those things we're working on right now is trying to figure out what are the potentials and the possibilities. Kind of discussed this a little bit earlier, as soon as we built it, they came out of the woodworks. It was a system that took 50 years for the town to approve to even put something in the ground. And as soon as we put it in the ground, the demand has been for more. And we reached our capacity, and then we did some engineering maneuvering, and we got a little more capacity, and we went through that capacity, and we did it 5 times. We're in the 5th phase. Unfortunately, those engineering techniques and studies and things that we've used to expand capacity in the past, they're really no longer. Any future expansions is going to be a financial impact to the town. It's going to be a big expansion. It's going to be costly, and we need to know, to what extent we want to expand. This area here shows the different phases that we went through. The yellow portion of the downtown area, that's phase 1. That's all the low-lying areas along the waterfront. Phase 2 is the Shank Painter Road area, as well as the Manor, which is now Seashore Point. That was phase 2. Phase 3, we got a lot of funding through ARA funding. We had a small project, probably about this big. Then ARA funding came along. We were able to capitalize that, bring it to the Truro town line, as far as as far west as Provincetown Inn. So we really capitalized on phase 3 using grants, and then phase 4 was the campground at Coastal Acres. Phase 5 really doesn't have a collection phase. It's phase 5 when we came up with that, which is that additional 155,000 gallon capacity. That was just to infill connections within the existing sewer area. There's 600 properties that remain within those shaded areas that are not connected. And our goal is to start connecting those 600 properties. Even with the additional capacity that we got with phase 5, we only can serve 150 of those 600 properties. We can't serve them all. Again, we're going to be faced with a constraint of sewer capacity in the near future. So one thing to note, the town has a very large collection system, and it has the ability to add capacity. And in the areas that it does serve, it serves about 75% of the properties. So, and 85% of the flow in town. So we have infrastructure in the ground already within areas that are like I said, 75% of the properties are within the areas that we serve. We just don't serve everyone in there. So, if we can even just serve within the sewer district that we have, we're in good shape. We'll serve 85% of the flow in town. But again, there's some limitations to that. It doesn't allow for much growth. It doesn't allow for much housing opportunities in other areas. It doesn't allow for people to expand on their house, whether they want to add a garage or a bedroom or things like that, outside of the sewer district. So we made a recommendation to the select board. Phase 5 is a 2-phase project, and we're able to release the first phase, which is 30,000 gallons of Title V flow. There's the breakdown right there. The 5 priority categories are public health failures, economic development, housing gallons, municipal use, police station, VFW, not VFW, but VMCC Community Center, as well as abutters. People that don't fall in the other 4 categories, we created a category for them. I'm just going to skip this slide because of time constraints. We are looking at system resiliency. Our system's 20 years old now. A lot of pipes in the ground, a lot of infrastructure is 20 years old at this point. We need to start looking to replace some of that stuff and make sure that, we keep our system operational. And at the same time, we want to, have some consideration to climate change and the fact that what we saw in 2018, our whole downtown flooded. We need to start making some adjustments for that. Here's a little overview map of what sea level rise could impact the town of Provincetown. A lot of the hashed in red area is, anticipates anything less than a 10-foot sea level rise. So any area that you see shaded in 8 red would flood if we saw a 10-foot sea level rise, which we don't expect to probably in our lifetime, but it has been forecasted within 100 years, depending on, who you use for your data. Talked a little bit about replacing facilities. Another key point that's gone is we're undergoing right now is we're doing an outreach, a sewer outreach. And this is important for everyone here. We sent letters out that should have gone out yesterday. We'll probably start getting, some questions soon, but the outreach letters to gauge interest from people on who's interested in sewer. We're doing 2 types of outreach. We're outreaching to the folks that are within the sewer district to find out who wants to connect within the sewer district, but we're also outreaching to people outside the sewer district to see who has interest. And we will use this information to, 1, go to the select board in February, as well as the Water Sewer Board, the Board of Health, and say, hey, listen, there's a lot of interest in these different areas. We got E3, West 4, and find out where we should consider expanding the sewer system, as well as get an idea on what kind of treatment capacity we need in the future. And it's just an interest. We haven't done one since 2012. It would just be a good way to gauge interest in the sewer system. And this is where you guys would be most helpful. You complete this form, you return it to DPW, you could scan it and send it email, you can just drop it off at our office, but we're going to tally all the responses and put a location to it and find out where the most interest for sewer capacity is. So what we see here is the shaded area or the outlined blue are all the sewer districts in town. So this is our sewer district, and within them are properties not served by sewer. So you'll see the different properties that are shaded. Those are properties that aren't sewered that we're trying to target. There's 600 properties within these shaded areas, within these outlined areas that we're trying to serve. And then this is, outside the sewer district, those are other districts that we have. E3, I mentioned, this is the Conwell, Harry Kemp area. People are not served. E4, not served. And basically it just gives us a comparison. So once we get that outreach letter, we'll start putting, little stars on the map to just identify, okay, where's the interest, where's not the interest, and try to kind of piece together, what's our next phase of sewer systems going to look like. This is just a cost breakdown on what it would cost per betterment to serve each additional area. Serving within the sewer district, you'll see the cost per gallon, and then it goes up the further you go out, and basically up to $275 per gallon to serve people. Planning for the next 20 years, we talked about the checkerboard system. I think that's one of the things that we need to remove. I told you all capital expansion is done through betterments. We need to raise betterments in order to expand the collection system and do some treatment expansion. So we'll need to address the checkerboard system. We'll need to modify growth management to support some of the other priorities. And these things will be discussed in future meetings coming up with the select board. We plan to bring forward a range of options for treatment disposals. Some of them is to relocate the effluent beds to Mata Field and maybe reuse some of the sites. Example, Jerome Smith Road, there's a soccer field. We could take the effluent beds from Jerome Smith Road, put it to Mata Field, and maybe use that site for either a housing project or something of the sort. So just a couple of things that we'll kick around. We need to gauge the interest of Truro too. Do we want to serve Truro? Do we want to serve that Beach Point area? Looking forward, by 2021, we're going to serve 3 times the properties that we had originally planned in 2020. And to fully serve the town as well as Truro, you're looking at about another $64 million to serve the remaining portions of Provincetown and Truro. I think the big decision we need to decide at this point is whether we need to serve everybody. Do we need to serve Pilgrim Heights? Do we need to serve Thistlemore? And, those are some of the big discussions that need to be had is where are the limitations? Where do we stop? And with that, and past the half-hour mark, I'm just going to conclude it right there. I'll leave on the slide the available gallons right now for sewer. These gallons are available now to people that are within the sewer district. If you're in a butter, you can get on the wait list. We have 10,000 gallons of committed wait list flow right now. So we only have 6,700 gallons available. But we do expect that number to increase next year. We'll raise that another 25,000 gallons there. With that, I'm just going to open it up to questions.
Okay, I see Susan Brown has a question. Go ahead, Susan.
Yes, probably not a very sophisticated question, so we might as well start here. Just as a little background information about me, I think I'm in the Kendall district. I'm at 478 Commercial. I signed up immediately as soon as I knew the sewer was going through, even though I did not have any problems. We had those B5 sewer systems, I think they're called, when the water and flow went through that. But I always thought this was a very, very good idea. And I had a 10-year betterment, which I believe is almost all paid up. As people also know, when you're on the sewer system, in addition to your town taxes, you of course pay a minimum amount of tax for water use. That's to say, it's not based upon necessarily how much water you use. If you use over a certain amount, it'll be more, but even if you use under a certain amount, you still have to pay a standard rate for that and also for sewer. So I guess my question is, as the town goes forward, will I continue to pay extra taxes, not just on the water and sewer use, both minimum, that I currently use, but also to help fund the system as it goes forward and enlarges? Is that coherent?
Excuse me. So I think I can answer that. So only the users pay into the system. If you're using the system, you're the only ones that pay in. If you don't use water, you don't pay. If you don't use sewer, you don't pay. We do have a minimum bill, and that will go forward. And the reason why we have a minimum bill for both water and sewer is because if we didn't, the drop off of usage in the wintertime is so much that it doesn't allow us to operate a system that we need to 12 months out of the year. It just doesn't give us the revenue to operate the system. So although you're only using it for 3 months of the year, we still have to operate it the other 9 months. And that's why we have a minimum bill. So you can use as much as you want or as little as you want, but you'll always have that minimum bill.
Yes.
We have that for water. So water, I think, is $150. It's our minimum bill, and it counts up to 10,000 gallons of water. Sewer is just a minimum bill. But you do bring up a good point, and a lot of people don't know, is there are 2 bills with the sewer system. You have the betterment bill, which pays for all the infrastructure that's in the ground, the debt service that we have to pay. And then you have your user fee, which pays for the operation. So the crews that you see out there that are swapping pumps over and adding chemicals to the treatment process. So you got the infrastructure, you got the capital, and then you got the operating costs. So there are those 2 bills for sewer.
Okay. So if I can ask the last part of that question again, as I said, because I've been signed on for a little more than 10 years, my betterment bill, as I understand it, is almost completely paid off. As you move forward with the system to build other areas and permit other users to sign on, will that extra cost be reflected in individual town taxes?
So you say that you're at 10 years of paying your betterment off. Most betterments are paid off over 20 years. Yours may have been set up for 10 years. I'm not sure. That could be different.
I was told 10 years when I originally signed on, yes.
Okay, so it could be, and you can reach out to me and we can go through those.
Rich, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in here for a second. I think, Susan, this is a little complicated question that's kind of specific to you. So maybe if you could just chat with Rich afterwards offline. We have a couple other people that want to ask questions.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
That sounds great. I appreciate it.
Okay. We have 2 other people who want to ask questions, and don't forget, we want to get to our Eversource folks who are patiently waiting. So I'm going to ask you, just ask a question, just the question. So Alan Roth, just the question, please.
All right, I'll try. Rich, thank you. It was a great presentation. I'll try not to be overly too specific about my situation, but the general question relates to my situation because the area you mentioned, the Conwell, Harry Kemp area, and where I live is literally just beyond the line that you have drawn on the map that falls just outside the area, sort of south of Harry Kemp on Conwell Street. It looks like the line goes up Conwell Street just a little bit past Bradford and kind of stops at that point. And what I'm wondering about is, we've had our house 20 years. I don't personally have any recollection of ever in that 20 years having been asked whether or not we'd be interested in a sewer hookup. And it may be that the previous owner was asked back when you guys in the year, back 20 years ago, were gauging interest, and he wasn't interested in signing up because he was selling the house. But I guess the question is, if you're going to poll people in that E3 area for their interest, it may be years down the road before you're able to serve people in that E3 area. If people currently live literally just a property or 2 beyond the existing system, is there any chance that people who literally live just beyond the existing system can get an extension of the existing system, or is that just out of the question?
You're not the only boundary. We've had many of these boundaries around town, and there have been some that we've been able to do short extensions to capture some of those close abutting properties. What you do is just shift the line a little bit, and then those neighbors say, hey, I'm just outside the system. Can't you just serve me too? The way that those lines were drawn was based on gravity. So that E3 area and that outreach and those those lines that delineate that area is the reaches on where we can feed by gravity to a pump station. And the pump station for that E3 area would be right down by Moss Shop. And, you know, that area in there is where the pump station. So to answer your question, yeah, it may be. It just sometimes those little extensions are basically a modification to the system that we don't want to keep doing. You know, some of them are just little 2-inch lines that we extend up the road to serve one property. And we don't want to do that. We want to put a main. We want to put a 6-inch main to serve these properties. So I don't like doing that unless we really have to, where someone's site constrained, they can't put any Title V system, or the Title V system failed. We kind of look at it as a case-by-case basis. Our goal is to serve that E3 area at some point. And you're right, it's probably not going to happen in 5 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you very much, Alan. There is one more question. I'm going to ask that person if they could just put it into the chat, the actual question directly to Rich, because we have our Eversource folks who are being very patient. I'm going to switch over that. I'm also going to ask Rich if you could take your screen off there. There we go. All right, thank you very much. And again, the last question, just send that directly in the chat to Rich, if he wouldn't mind just answering in the chat.
Yeah, if I could just say, if anyone wants to ask questions in the chat, I'll stick around for a little bit and I'll certainly answer them.
Excellent. And Susan, if you want to follow up on yours, that's a great place to do. Let's switch over now to our Eversource folks. Ronit Goldstein is a community relations specialist, and Jennifer Kodaspati, there we go, yes, who is a project outreach specialist with Eversource. And they're going to now give us a presentation on the newly built battery backup system. So take it away, guys.
Great. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for having me. As you mentioned, I'm community relations. I'm supporting the project team during the duration of the project, but I also cover Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard, parts of the South Shore for community relations by Blue Sky, by Gray Sky. I do storm duty on the Cape. And so I'm happy to, separate from this meeting, if this group, I think it's a great, I'm really pleased that you reached out to us. It's a good contact to have and a good organization to be in contact with should there be other questions related to infrastructure and upgrades in town, electricity, and the like. So I'm going to share my screen, Pat, if you don't mind. And I'm supported here by Jennifer, who is doing the outreach with the community for the duration of the project. So it's great to be here. Thank you again. Just let me know if I've done this right. Let's see. You all see my screen?
Yes. Yeah, we got it. Yep.
Great. And I want to, trying to see if I can do slideshow, but it's covered by the, oh, I can move it. Great. All right. Great. Can you all see my slide? Great. So I wanted to start with this picture. I personally love it because I think it's an aerial shot that was taken in April of the Outer Cape Battery Energy Storage System, what we call the BESS for short. And I love that it's a great picture. I'm going to tell you a little bit of what you're looking at in a minute, but you can see the monument, as you can see my cursor. Nothing more P-Town than this monument, I think you'd all agree. And then the water tank that also has a connection to the project as well. This is the water tank that's behind Rich's office in DPW. You can probably see it every day when he comes into work. And this is at the transfer station. So why aren't my slides progressing? All right, sorry guys, they're not progressing. Let's see if this will work. There we go. So a little bit about why P-Town. In 2017, Eversource submitted a filing as part of a broader filing to the Department of Public Utilities and was given approval at the end of 2017 in November to start a pilot program in the Outer Cape. And the Outer Cape was chosen, for the purpose of a battery energy storage system. So we were given approval by the Department of Public Utilities, and in the spring of 2019, April 2019, the town meeting floor in Provincetown approved the project at the transfer station, and the exact location is 90 Race Point Road. Now, why P-Town? P-Town, I'm going to move my stuff over. It's a little challenging because I can see. There we go. So here's a little view of the Outer Cape. We have a sole line that feeds, we call it the 96 circuit. And it feeds all the way from Wellfleet. That's our Wellfleet substation. And it's one sole line. So as you can imagine, in the electrical world, some of the grid modernization upgrades that we do today is to try to create redundancies. And you can see that to Provincetown, there's one sole distribution line. And historically, that circuit was not, didn't have the best performance. And for those of you that have been in town quite some time, you can recall winters that when power was out, it was potentially out for a while. And part of that reason was this circuit. There was no other way to feed the Outer Cape from Wellfleet out. Should there, if there were a fault along that line, from the fault outward, there would be no electricity. And until we went out there and conducted the fix, there was no other way to feed or backfeed electricity into the Outer Cape, your town, Truro, and part of Wellfleet. So that's why it was chosen as a prime and excellent location for a battery backup. The project was permitted and the construction began in March of 2020. And I'll talk a little bit about where we are today. So what will this battery actually do? So it'll have a couple of functions. It's going to do, during peak hours, it's going to be able to feed the distribution system and give you backup power for somewhere up to 10 hours. And that would be on the off season in the winter. And again, it depends on how much the load is, meaning how much electricity people are using at the time. And during peak season, during summer months, it would power up the town, provide backup power for about 1.5 to 3 hours. And what it is it's the battery itself is a lithium ion battery system, similar to what you have on your cell phones, just a little more fancy, we'll say. A little more fancy, and it has a little more bells and whistles than we have on our cell phone, okay? In addition to the battery itself, we're creating a smart grid and also a microgrid. And what I mean by that, the smart grid portion is that along this line, and I'll show you pictures in a minute, we're installing along the poles automation devices that are remote automation so that we don't have to send a troubleshooter out to fix. They can operate remotely. So from our dispatch in New Bedford, we can operate those switches and they can feed electricity in different directions, creating redundancy throughout the town. So there are already some switches in town, but this is additional new types of switches that are really gonna shore up this line and give us more versatility and ability to control the system. That's really what it is about. And the goal, the focus of the company, aside from this being a clean energy project and a renewable, it's a reliability project. And it gives us the ability to reduce the number of folks that are out at any given time and reduce the time that they're out by creating these switches. The smart grid is that piece. The microgrid is really that our second phase in commissioning this project and turning the battery on, so to speak, is that we will be able to create a microgrid, meaning an island, right? So if you think in terms of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, they're an island. If the need were to, if it were to come to a situation where the line were faulted in one place, this battery would be able to island the load, would take the entire load of electricity from Wellfleet out. Of course, you would be the beneficiaries in Provincetown because you'll get the electricity before everybody else. So that is one component that's pretty unique. And the backup is only a battery to this microgrid. There's no other backup, no solar or anything else. How did I turn? Trying to think of there it goes. All right. So when you're looking, I love this aerial view because you can look at the different components. It's pretty simple. The battery charges from the grid and discharges to the grid. If only we could just plug it in, right? It sounds very simple, but it is comprised of a number of components that are pretty complex. On each side are the transformers that bring the electricity, the AC electricity from the grid to the battery building. If you think in terms of either side, there's 4 rectangles, we'll say in the building, we'll show you. One on this end, one on this end. The inverters or the chargers that take the energy from the grid, convert it from AC to DC. And then in the middle, there are 2, if you can see my cursor, 2 large battery rooms. Now here are the batteries. There are about 6,000 batteries in the facility. They're all stacked up in racks. And notable in this slide is that we've worked with your public safety officials, both police and fire, on all of the safety components to keep this facility safe. What's in place is a regular sprinkler system, a dry agent Novec system, and each, the reason I say this on this slide is because each unit, each module is encased, and our safety engineer likes to call it a scallop wrapped in bacon, because each battery is encased in that safety, that Novec safety component, that dry agent. So it basically prevents, should one battery heat up and in very extreme situations, catch fire, it won't propagate to the next cell because of that bacon, so to speak, encasement, that Novec encasement. As I mentioned, approximately 7,000, I think I said 6,000, but it's 7,000 lithium ion batteries. This is a screenshot, a photo of both rooms, battery room A and battery room B. This next one shows you the inverters. They're also called PCS, they're power conversion system. I like to just call them chargers because they change the charge from AC to DC and then back from DC to AC on the grid. And on the right is a picture of the integration system, which is a specialized system called Eros, and it really integrates everything that we just talked about, including the fire suppression system. So it's pretty innovative, and all of this is tied into our SCADA system, which is our remote capability system out of our New Bedford and as well as Mass Ave facilities, to make sure we have full remote control of this battery, because there's nobody that's going to be sitting and running the battery in the system, in the building itself. It's all conducted remotely. Over
Ronit,
here,
can I, sorry about that. Can I just, I know you had said, and perhaps most people know what AC and DC is, but I didn't before I came to this project. So if you can just go back to that picture of the inverters or the power, the PCS, what Ronit's talking about is that those inverters there, they convert the electricity from direct current, DC, which is the batteries, to AC, alternating current, which is what our grid runs on ultimately. So, and vice versa when we are charging or discharging to the grid. So that's just kind of a fun fact there if folks weren't sure as what that meant. I didn't, and so I just wanted to share that.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Jen. That's important. And if there's anything that I'm saying, certainly at the end when we have a couple questions, and I can stick around for a few minutes. I've included in the presentation, it's hard to see, but this is a picture of one of the poles along the way. If you look at the top of the pole, and I'm kind of pointing to these devices, they're called reclosers, and they basically, we have them throughout our system now, but they're automated devices that help to switch electricity from one direction, flowing from one direction to a different direction. Some of these reclosers you'll see also create, will shake off limbs. They'll open and close to shake off anything that might be, limbs from trees during a storm. They will help to basically auto correct the system. Sometimes if you see a little bit of a flickering of your lights, it's the system auto correcting itself during a storm. If it goes out permanently, that means there's a fault. If it flickers and comes back up, it's usually the system auto-correcting itself during a storm, if you've ever experienced that. To the left is, they basically look like trailers, but these are our load banks. This is the phase that we're at right now in the project. The building is constructed, all the batteries are installed, all the equipment is inside. Right now, these load banks basically simulate activity on the grid so that we can test the battery to see if it works right. So that's the phase that we're in, with anticipated completion of the project fully with all of the components that I mentioned, both the ability to carry the entire load of the Outer Cape and just provide some backup here and there. All of those components we anticipate in the second quarter of 2022. So coming in the spring, by the spring of 2022. That's the end of this, and I wanted to show a really quick video, if you don't mind. It's about 20 seconds. Pat, what do you think? Just shows you everything you just saw.
I think we can do 20 seconds.
All right, I think we can do 20 seconds. Oh, wait a minute, screen sharing is stopped. Let me do it one more time. I got to share the sound too, so I better remember to do that. Where'd the video go? Here it is. All right.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. Tell me that I can and I won't. That's what guides me the most. Your lies, I'll do what I want.
And that's all I have for you. I'd love to take some questions, Pat, from anyone that has any questions, and I certainly can stick around for a few minutes if people need me.
Very much appreciate it. Thank you. Two wonderful presentations. Jennifer, thanks for the clarification of the AC/DC. Personally, I thought that was a heavy metal band, so I very much appreciate
Me too.
the cleanup there. I did have one question. Is there any contemplation, thoughts of making the lines underground? And is that really a useful thing? I think a lot of people think that's the way to go in high wind areas, but what's the comment on that?
That is probably one of the most popular questions I get throughout my work in the region in general. If only we had time and resources. I will say that it's very costly to put it underground, which would go into rates. The number one. Number two, restoration, believe it or not, would be longer because we have to dig safe, which means call Verizon and other utilities to mark their facilities, which versus going up on a pole and making a fix. But primarily it's a time and a cost, and it would be very costly for the residents and tax ratepayers, really. That's the biggest, but the restoration would be longer. I don't know if that answered your question, Pat, but that's the short answer.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, it was two-part. One was, it is a myth that it's better to be underground than above ground. And is it a myth, or is it 6 of one, half dozen of the other? What is it?
I think it really depends. I mean, I think what's really key for us is not so much the overhead or underground, is just to continue to upgrade the system. Reliability is the big focus. Other than renewable and green technology, the utility is focused on reliability, and we're actually, that's where the Department of Public Utilities holds our feet to the fire, is really on reliability and reducing outages and time of outage. And so it's really about upgrading the infrastructure and bringing it up to this, up to snuff to 2021. And this is a great example of what it's going to do both to the grid and reliability with the switching capability.
And full operation is set for, I'm sorry, you said fall of 2022?
Spring it's hard to put a date on it, but we're talking right now, looking at Q2, so the end of the second quarter of 2022, so somewhere in the May-June timeframe, excuse me.
And Bessie will be operating. We'll call it Bessie.
Bessie, I like that it's Bessie instead of BSS, because Bessie sounds, it's a woman.
There you go. And I see in the chat, Scott has a question.
Sure.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Security of the electric grid in this country is a huge issue right now. It's being discussed on a national level. For those of us in P-Town, this is a nice, shiny new target. Can you speak to us about what you have incorporated to secure this facility?
So thanks for that, Scott. So as you know, Eversource is part of a national organization that requires very strict and stringent security measures as a whole, and then regionally in the Northeast, as to be part of the grid. This facility will be treated like one of our substations. So there will be alarms and security. It's under lock and not a simple lock and key. And there will be cameras, security cameras as well. We have both security on the safety side, and we have security on the just preventing folks from going there. Aside from that, it's also inside the DPW, so there's additional security to the DPW and cameras that have been installed outside of the DPW as well. So security is at the utmost of our importance, similar to our substations. Although if you've seen our substations, I think this is probably the most beautiful of our substations that I've ever seen. There will be no getting into that facility. If that gives you assurance. It's held to the same standards as our substations, and then some.
Steve has a question also. Steve, I think you got
yes, my mute button. So in the event of an outage, how quick would the battery pick up the load? Is it 10 minutes, instantaneous? Will we know?
Yeah, so right now, just so you know, without the battery, the switching capability along the Cape, if I give the tornadoes as an example, we went that day, and you recall the tornadoes in 2019, from over 100,000 customers out, in a matter of minutes, we went down to 52,000. So we do already have switch capability that's in minutes, sometimes in seconds. The battery should deploy quickly, and it really will provide backup into the distribution system that will then conduct switching, if that makes sense. So it provides the power to the existing grid in town, and that's why we did some upgrades to the existing equipment in town.
Is that automated, or does someone have to do something at a remote location?
It's automated.
Thank you. Great.
Other questions? Liz has a question.
Hi, I had a question. Did I understand you correctly that these batteries are charging from the grid and that they are not in any way connected to the solar panels that are all over the transfer station?
That's correct. I believe those solar panels are either private or the town's, but they're not connected.
And is there any plan to have a solar connection at some point, like to partner with the town? I was just thinking that could extend the time that it could keep the town running if it had a solar component.
Understood. At this point, I'm not aware that with this project there's a plan to connect, but I do know that we have additional solar projects in the pipeline that have not yet been permitted through the Department of Public Utilities, and I believe there may be solar components with those. So it typically makes sense to pair the two. We do have utility owned and run solar throughout the state. So we're already in the know of how to do that. So I believe that'll be coming down the pipeline. I just don't know that it's, I don't know for certain with this particular project that it will happen at this time.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, Jeffrey, I think you just were saying this was a fascinating conversation. I didn't interpret that to mean you had a question, but that's
not a question, just a comment. Thank you for doing this, and both presentations were really excellent.
Pat, I would be remiss if I didn't thank your public officials and didn't thank Rich Waldo for his partnership. He's been on the project longer than me and longer than Jennifer. Helping to work with the company to site it. There were a couple of different locations, and so he's been there all along. Rich, your town management, as well as Tim Famulari, who is your environmental resource director and conservation agent. They've been wonderful to work with. So this is a community battery, and we've always called it a community battery. So we're thankful for the community for the partnership.
Wait, we got one more question sneaking in there. Carrie has a question.
Yes. Does the number of hours that the battery will support usage in the town not only depend on the season, but on the weather? In other words, if it's the dead of winter, presumably the hours would be fewer because people are trying to heat their homes. If it's a hot July day, the same thing. For example, this latest outage, what was it, about a week ago or something, power was out in the town for about 15 hours, I believe. Would that count as an off season? In other words, would we have approximately 10.5 hours of battery supply at that time? But if it were colder, it would be fewer?
That's correct. So depending on how much people are using, this week, for good or bad or indifferent, on Wednesday, what you experienced was the 96 line having a fault, which is the very reason that we are constructing this battery storage system in P-Town. Had it been up and running, you would have had power more quickly. So it's a good, not that we were trying to show an example, really had no control over it, but it is a perfect example of what you just said. And it really depends on how much people are using. So if folks say you need to curtail use, lower your use of power so we can conserve it, it would last, yes, it would last longer. And if people aren't heating their homes like they probably weren't last week, or very minimally, it probably would have lasted the good 8 to 10 hours. Yes.
Other questions? Looks like we have exhausted the questions at this point, but I did want to say, Jennifer, if you could just say, you put an email address into the chat if folks are interested in any updates on the project. And if you just want to say that out loud, that might be helpful to folks as well.
Sure. Yes, I typically send out construction updates and to some of the residents in town. So if you're interested in staying up to date on what we're doing with the project, you can email me at projectinfo@eversource.com, or we can, I think, you may have, Pat, have our contact information as well. That's just our project mailbox, but feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to add you to the list.
That's excellent. Thank you. And Rich, is Rich still here? Yeah, there, I see him. First of all, thank you for answering questions in the chat for people. And is there an email address where folks could contact you if they have more questions? If that would be all right?
Yeah, I'll add it into the chat right now.
Okay.
Pat, we did provide a one-pager to your membership should folks be interested in an overview. Jen and her group puts that together and it goes out to the public. It's our latest and greatest update.
Oh, that would be excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you again to our presenters. This was excellent. Rich, just a note there, check your chat. Rich has put in his official email address, richwaldo@provincetown-ma.gov, in case you have more questions. But I do want to thank, once again, one of our greatest resources is knowledge. And it's folks like you, our presenters today, that provide us with that knowledge on topics that we wouldn't even think we should be knowledgeable about, but we should be. So much appreciated. Thank you so much. Thank you to those that organized it, Kevin for getting our speakers, and Scott for setting up the Zoom as always. And once again, thank you so very much to our presenters. A round of virtual applause. Yay. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good one. Be safe, everybody.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Thank you.